Good afternoon. My focus is all about communication disorders, and my name is Kirkby Morales. What are communication disorders? According to the American Speech and Hearing Association, or ASHA, communication disorder is an impairment in the ability to receive, send, process, and comprehend concepts or verbal, nonverbal, and graphic symbol systems. A communication disorder may be evident in the processes of hearing, language, and or speech. A communication disorder may range in severity from mild to profound. It may be developmental or acquired. A communication disorder may result in a primary disability or it may be secondary to other disabilities. HealthResearchFunding.org says that communication disorders refer to the different kinds of speech and language disorders. This kind of disorder affects the ability of a person to utter words or to perform verbal communication. People who have this kind of disorder possess limited ability in socializing with other persons through speaking. When do communication disorders begin? Children begin to develop the communicative skills that form the foundation of language in very early infancy, long before they begin to produce their first words and sentences. The most severe communication disorders in young children are usually associated with other developmental disabilities or severe hearing loss or deafness and are usually noticed as part of delayed development during infancy. These children may be delayed in cooing and babbling, be generally unresponsive to communication routines with their caregivers, or may have severe feeding problems, which may be associated with later difficulty with oral motor coordination necessary for speech sound development. Other speech and language disorders, such as specific language impairment, stuttering, voice dysfunction, problems with articulation, or lesser degrees of hearing loss, typically not observed until after the child begins to talk. Delayed production of words may be the first indicator of a communication disorder in some children. The American Speech Language Hearing Association in 1993 categorizes communication disorders into three. First, language disorders. Second, speech disorders. Third, hearing disorders. What are language disorders? These refer to impaired comprehension and or use of spoken, written, and or other symbol systems. These include any delay or disability affecting the child's ability to comprehend or receptive language and or appropriately use words or gestures or expressive language. The disorder may involve any of the following in any combination: the form of language, or its phonology, morphology, syntax, the content of language, or semantics, the function of language in communication, or pragmatics. In general, language disorders can be grouped in the following categories of coexisting conditions: disorders associated with global cognitive deficits, disorders associated with autism and other developmental disorders, disorders associated with hearing impairments, disorders associated with social or environmental factors, disorders not associated with other impairments or other disabilities. Speech disorders. A speech disorder is an impairment of the articulation of speech sounds, fluency, and or voice. All disorders affecting the child's ability to produce clear, intelligible spoken language are considered speech disorders. Of the preschool-aged children served by speech-language pathologists in the United States, It is estimated that about 60% have a primary language delay or disorder and 40% have some type of speech disorder, according to Peters Johnson in 1992. In general, speech disorders include fluency disorders, voice disorders, disorders of articulation and phonology. Communication disorders may range from sound substitutions to the inability to use speech and language. Young children with a communication disorder may show delays or atypical development in one or more of the following areas. Articulation, the motor movements involved in the production of speech sounds. Traditionally, this term was used to refer to phonology and articulation. A typically developing child may have acquired the phonology of the language and yet still make some articulation errors in producing given speech sounds. Fluency, the overall flow or rhythm of speech production. Typically, speech is produced with relatively few hesitations, few word repetitions, and no part word or sound repetitions. The flow of speech production is typically without effort or exaggerated facial expressions. Language comprehension, also referred to as reception or processing. The final result and intermediate processes in the analysis and understanding of speech. It includes a series of stages beginning with speech perception, sound identification, identification and access to words, morphological and syntactic analysis, and application of word knowledge. For older children and adults, this term also applies to the understanding of written language. Language production, the spoken or gestural, in American Sign Language, expression of language. The abilities to produce sounds, syllables, words, and sentences that form conversation. For older children and adults, this term also applies to the understanding of written language. Morphology, the smallest meaningful units in language, including words that can stand alone, and syllables or sounds that can add meaning to words, and the rules for combining these units. For example, in English, words such as boat, book, and walk are morphemes, words that can stand alone. English also uses a number, although not as many as other languages, of sounds and syllables that can be added to words to modify the meanings of words, such as past tense, plural, etc. These are termed morphological markers. Phonology, the component of language that includes consonants and vowels, sound features, syllables, syllable features, such as syllable stress, and rules for combining sounds and syllables to form words and phrases. For example, in English, the maximum number of consonants that can occur in a row is 3, and some combinations are not allowed, such as S, H, and V. Pragmatics, the use of language in context, including implicit and explicit communicative intent, nonverbal communication such as intonation, communicative gestures, facial expression. Social aspects of communication and discourse, such as turn taking, topic maintenance, etc. Semantics, the meaning of words and the meaningful roles of words in phrases or sentence contexts. The definitional meanings of words, including the semantic features of the word ball, such as round, can be thrown, etc. The referent categories of words, such as baseball, football, soccer ball, etc., as well as the meaningful roles of semantic relations, function, or thematic roles such as agent or performer of the action, are all parts of semantics. Syntax, the rules governing the order and relationships among words or phrases in sentences. For example, in English, sentence subjects must be included in sentences, unlike Spanish, and precede the verb. The verb must agree with the subject in number. If the subject is the boys, the verb must be run, not runs. Voice. The vocal quality, pitch, and intensity of speech. Typically, speech is produced with smooth and effortless production of voice or vibration of the vocal folds that is not unintentionally whispered or hoarse.